vehicle now. Exit the vehicle. Show me your hands.
Here.
1033 at 15 hours.
I'm here. What is your reason, sir? Step out. What is your reason?
Step out now.
All right. No, don't.
Hey guys. Wow. You're barreling down the highway in the soft dawn light when suddenly red and blue storms enter your rearview mirror, slicing through your calm. You probably won't survive this, or at least your sense of safety won't. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments below, and let's go on the journey of today's story together. You're gripping the steering wheel, heart thundering as the patrol car pulls up behind you. You know you haven't done anything wrong. Yet the uniformed officer leans in and asks, "Do you know who you are?" Your mind loops. You see your face in the morning light, startled, the dash reflections dancing uncertain faith in your own name. This wasn't supposed to happen. You trudge through the aftermath of this moment, and inside, you're shaken by that single question, a shorthand for suspicion, a trigger for upheaval. You don't just feel profiled, you feel erased. The officer glances at a screen, tallies flicker your details flagged, not for reckless driving, but for something deeper, advocacy. You're an immigrant rights supporter, yes, but that shouldn't translate to target. Think, hundreds of others exist in hidden patterns, landscape-wide. You're now one of them. And yet, at this very moment, you stand accused by the machinery of enforcement. It's cinematic, the lights, the hush of rubber on pavement, your pulse racing. It's storytelling that screams, you're under watch. In the glare, your identity slips from flesh to data to suspicion. Remember that image. A citizen advocate halted, ordinary driveway, turned stage for enforcement. And not far away, somewhere across the country, another car slows under flashing lights. That too could be them. The narrative rolls, one heartbeat at a time. You keep your hands where they can see them, but your mind is racing through possibilities. Why here? Why now? The answer hides in a string of quiet memos you've never read, directives that blend federal immigration enforcement with everyday traffic patrols. In the last 3 months, ICE has ramped up highway presence in certain corridors, often near court districts and community meeting hubs. The stated goal, intercept individuals with outstanding warrants, but advocates have noticed the pattern those stopped are disproportionately tied to immigrant rights events or known activist networks. From your vantage point behind the wheel, it's impossible to tell where the local police end and federal ICE officers begin. The badge on the other side of the glass may represent both. This isn't a random checkpoint. This is precision work, cross-referencing license plates against databases that now include rally attendance and organizational affiliations scraped from public records, and in some cases, social media. According to a ProPublica review of TRAC data, over 18% of ICE detentions in the last year began as state or local traffic stops. That's a steep climb from the 7% baseline just 5 years ago. And here's the odd, almost absurd detail. A recent ICE.gov press release boasted about recovering exotic reptiles during a vehicle search in Texas, an arrest that began as an immigration stop but ended with an iguana in a cardboard box. It's a reminder that in the blurred lines of these operations, almost anything can be pulled into the net. On talk radio that week, one conservative commentator framed the tactic as leveraging existing law enforcement capacity, a clever euphemism for embedding ICE in places it normally wouldn't tread. But immigrant communities, especially those with outspoken members like you, hear a different message. Silence yourself or risk being the next headline. So, as you sit there in the driver's seat, the officer's eyes fixed on you, you understand this is about more than traffic law. This is about a system that's decided your advocacy is probable cause. The highway feels less like a road home and more like a net tightening. The window's down now, and the morning air is sharp, almost metallic, like it knows what's coming. You hand over your license, your registration, your proof of insurance, each document trembling slightly in your grip. You watch the officer's eyes flick across your name. That's the moment it clicks. This stop isn't about a rolling stop sign, a broken taillight, or anything mechanical. This stop is about you. 3 weeks ago, you spoke at a vigil for a family separated at the border. Someone filmed it, and it made the rounds on local social media. You didn't say anything illegal, just talked about the human cost of deportation, about how policies written in quiet offices unravel lives on noisy streets. But now you wonder, did that clip get tagged, archived, shared in a way you never consented to? The officer takes a step back, speaks into his radio. A second vehicle pulls in behind him, unmarked but radiating the same official gravity. 2 men step out plain clothes, tactical belts. No introductions, just questions. Where were you headed? Where do you work? Have you been in contact with anyone who has an ICE detainer? You hear yourself answering calmly, but inside you're replaying the words of a friend, a public defender, who warned you. Advocates get swept up too. She had a case last year. A community organizer in Ohio stopped for failure to signal and detained for 36 hours before an attorney could even confirm charges. On a distant corner of your mind, you recall reading a New York Times profile of a legal aid volunteer in California pulled over for expired tags, handed over to ICE despite no criminal record. It's the same script, different cast. And then there's the surreal side note. Just last month, according to ICE.gov, an officer in Florida stopped a van supposedly for suspicious weaving and ended up seizing a shipment of counterfeit Pokemon cards along with 2 undocumented passengers. Truth, stranger than fiction. Now, standing here on the asphalt, you feel the weight of that truth pressing on your ribs. This is no misunderstanding. This is a message. Your pulse steadies, but not because you're calm, because survival demands focus. You've read the numbers. They don't lie, and they don't care about your fear. According to TRAC Immigration's latest report, nearly 110,000 people were detained by ICE last fiscal year, and more than 60% of them had no prior criminal convictions. Dig deeper into the data, and you see a rising subset traffic stop to detention cases now making up a significant share of initial apprehensions in multiple states. It's a statistical shadow most Americans never notice, but you do. In the briefing notes released quietly on ICE.gov, there's a term, collateral apprehensions. It sounds like corporate jargon, but it's shorthand for picking up individuals who weren't the primary target of an operation. In practice, it means that if ICE shows up looking for someone else and finds you without papers, with an expired visa, or sometimes even with valid status, but in a flagged category, you can still be taken in. The chilling part, collateral apprehension surged by 25% in the past year. Then there's the fact-checking from Migration Policy Institute. Local federal partnerships under Section 287G agreements now exist in over 70 jurisdictions, deputizing local officers to enforce immigration law during routine stops. This isn't isolated, this is infrastructure. And here's the bizarre, almost absurd tidbit. In one official ICE report from Arizona, a highway stop intended to detain a DACA recipient also turned up an abandoned ostrich wandering on the shoulder. The bird was unharmed, but the driver was not processed and held for over 2 weeks. That detail barely made a blip in the press, but it stays lodged in your mind as a strange, almost mocking footnote to a system that swallows both the ordinary and the extraordinary whole. Meanwhile, commentators on a Wired podcast call the practice data-driven intimidation, warning that plate readers and predictive analytics aren't neutral, they're trained on biased data sets. You feel that bias in your bones now, because you're sitting in the middle of its crosshairs. The statistics, the legal frameworks, the absurd headlines, they're all threads in the same net that's now cinched around you. You stand there, the asphalt radiating up through your shoes, and you can almost hear the courtroom arguments before they're spoken. On one side, the official stance is crisp, rehearsed. Law enforcement has a duty to uphold immigration statutes wherever and whenever they encounter violations. If you have nothing to hide, they say, you have nothing to fear. It's an argument anchored in the letter of the law, one they claim safeguards national security. But the counterweight is heavy: constitutional protections, freedom of speech, the right to dissent without fear of reprisal. Civil rights attorneys, like those from the ACLU, point out that when advocacy becomes grounds for enhanced surveillance or targeting, it slides toward political policing. In their brief on immigration enforcement and retaliation, they warn that using routine stops as a pretext to identify and detain outspoken community members is not just a breach of trust, it's a corrosion of democracy itself. Your own case feels like a microcosm of that debate. You didn't cross a border last night, you drove to work. You didn't smuggle contraband, you spoke at a vigil. And yet here you are, standing under the same sun that lit the faces of marchers in Selma, protesters in Standing Rock, and parents waiting outside detention centers. From the ICE.gov press feed comes a surreal aside. Last quarter, an enforcement operation in New Jersey included the arrest of an amateur beekeeper who had no criminal record but was cited for overstaying a visa by 7 months. The bees, unharmed, were given to a local farm. It reads almost comically until you realize the sting wasn't in the hives, it was in the policy. Meanwhile, an opinion piece in the New York Post praises these mixed operations as smart resource sharing, insisting they remove dangerous individuals before crimes occur. But danger is a slippery label, one that can stick to you without evidence, as you're experiencing now. The debate rages without you in the room, yet your body is part of the evidence. Each passing second, you are both a legal subject and a living question. Can a nation defend itself by silencing the very voices that seek to improve it? The moment the second unmarked vehicle pulls away, leaving you with the first officer, you know the ripples have already started. Somewhere in your phone, still locked in the console, messages are waiting. A friend saw the lights on the highway and texted others. Within minutes, a community group chat has turned into a triage center. Do we need to get a lawyer? Should we alert the press? Who's driving past to witness? It's not just about you. Your sudden stop is a warning shot to everyone in your orbit. That neighbor who translates for undocumented families at City Hall? She'll think twice before driving to the next meeting. The high school senior who volunteers at weekend clinics? He'll cancel his shift, afraid his DACA status might not shield him from a random stop. This is how a single traffic pullover metastasizes into silence. The numbers echo it. A Marshall Project analysis shows a measurable drop in community participation in public forums and legal workshops following high-profile ICE-involved traffic stops. Attendance in some counties falls by as much as 40% in the month after an arrest like yours. Fear travels faster than facts. Then there's the strange footnote buried in an ICE.gov release. During one highway operation in Nevada, agents reported unexpected agricultural hazards, which turned out to be a truckload of giant pumpkins spilling onto the road mid-stop. The produce was cleared. The driver, an undocumented farmhand, was detained. That's the blend mundane chaos and life-changing consequences that defines these raids. Later that night, in a social media thread on WLWT.com's local feed, a commenter writes, "If you don't want to get stopped, don't break the law." Another replies, "Advocacy is not a crime." The thread explodes with arguments, each side convinced the other is blind. You read it hours later, feeling each sentence as both shield and spear. By the time the officer hands back your documents, the damage is done. Not in your paperwork, but in the widening ring of people who will now drive more slowly, speak more softly, and maybe just maybe stop showing up at all. You make it home, but the quiet is heavier than the roadside asphalt. Every creak in the house feels amplified. Each passing car a reminder of flashing lights. You start noticing the way your shoulders hunch when you walk outside, the way you double-check intersections before pulling into traffic, not for safety, but for surveillance. Freedom, you realize, isn't just the absence of bars, it's the absence of that constant, invisible watch. In the days after, sleep comes late and fractured. You replay the stop in slow motion, trying to locate the instant when routine became risk. Friends tell you to let it go, but the truth is, letting it go feels like giving permission. You keep thinking of the beekeeping man in New Jersey, the pumpkin truck in Nevada, the vigil you spoke at, all disparate moments stitched together by the same invisible thread. The Migration Policy Institute published a piece last month noting that even lawful permanent residents have begun limiting their movement in areas with high ICE presence. They call it defensive immobility, a term that sounds academic until you feel it in your own legs. You used to drive to neighboring towns for advocacy events without a second thought. Now, the thought comes first, and it's a warning. Oddly, you stumble across an ICE.gov press item celebrating an agent's retirement, highlighting his love for community softball games and lifelong service to public safety. It's dissonant how the same institution can frame itself as both neighborly and unflinching in enforcement. That duality is part of why the fear lingers. You never know which version you'll meet on the road. In an independent op-ed, a columnist argues that the erosion of public trust in law enforcement doesn't begin with corruption scandals. It begins with everyday people feeling unsafe in the most ordinary moments, like driving to work. You feel seen in those words, but also exposed. So you move differently now. You plan routes with fewer highway miles. You park facing exits. You save numbers on speed dial that you hope you'll never need. This is your new normal, and it's not freedom, it's adaptation. The next time you drive past that stretch of highway, the memory returns like a shadow falling across the windshield. You keep your speed steady, eyes scanning every overpass and on-ramp. But underneath the tension, something else is stirring, a resolve not to let that moment define you in silence. You start talking about it, carefully at first, in living rooms and church basements, then at larger gatherings. Each time you see heads nodding, hands gripping coffee cups a little tighter. People recognize their own fear in your story, and that recognition is its own kind of power. You realize that telling the truth, in all its cinematic detail, is an act of resistance. The facts stay with you. TRAC's latest update shows that in counties with active local ICE cooperation, immigrant advocates are nearly twice as likely to be stopped for discretionary traffic offenses. A Cal Matters report traces how this disproportionate targeting shapes political participation, noting a sharp decline in voter registration among affected communities. These aren't just anecdotes, they're patterns, and patterns can be challenged. In the middle of reading those statistics, you find an odd note in an ICE.gov update. Agents in Texas stopped a minivan during an immigration interdiction and discovered it was also carrying a crate of antique typewriters. The cargo was released to the driver's cousin. The driver was not released at all. It's such a strange, almost poetic image, tools for words being separated from the person who used them, that it lingers in your mind as you plan your next speech. On social media, a CNN immigration segment about highway enforcement goes viral, sparking debates in the comments. Some accuse activists of exaggerating. Others share their own eerily similar stops. You decide to add your voice, not because you expect to change every mind, but because you refuse to be edited out of the conversation. So you keep telling it about the flashing lights, the unmarked cars, the questions that had nothing to do with driving. And with each retelling, you turn what was meant to be a silencing into an echo, carrying farther down the road than the engine's hum. Now the night is quieter. The cars outside are just cars again, their headlights painting brief streaks across the walls. You breathe slower, deeper, and the tension in your shoulders softens by degrees. The road, for all its shadows, still stretches in both directions. It's still yours to travel. You picture that morning again, the pullover, the questions, the weight of being seen not as yourself, but as a file in a system. But in the softer light of reflection, you also see what came after. The circles of people who listened, the nods that told you they'd felt it too, the conversations that wouldn't have happened if you'd stayed silent. The fear hasn't vanished, but it's no longer steering you. You've learned to drive with it in the passenger seat, acknowledging its presence without handing it the map. Each mile is an act of quiet defiance, a reminder that visibility can be both a risk and a shield. Somewhere, others are still out there, advocates, workers, parents keeping their own pace, scanning their own mirrors. You hope they'll hear your story, not as a warning to shrink away, but as an invitation to hold their ground. Because roads aren't just for moving bodies, they're for carrying voices. So when the next set of lights flares in the distance, you won't just brace for the stop. You'll remember the nights you kept driving, the rooms you filled with your voice, and the unshakable truth that journey is still yours. And maybe, just maybe, that's how the fear begins to fade, 1 mile, one story, one steady breath at a time.